Hey everyone, welcome back.
Yeah.
We're going to do a deep dive today
Oh, yeah.
into the world of forecasting.
Cool.
Not weather forecasting,
Right.
but forecasting future events.
Oh, casting the few.
Like, how can we predict what's going to happen
Right.
with greater accuracy? And we'll be using a book called Superforecasting, The Art and Science of Prediction
Okay.
by Philip Tetlock and Dan Gardner.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hoping to arm you with the key insights from this book
Right.
so you can up your own forecasting game.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
It's funny because a lot of people think forecasting is impossible.
Yeah.
Like, it's just something only people with crystal balls can do.
Right. Like, how could you possibly know what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Like, if you think about, like, historical events,
Mm-hmm.
like the Arab Spring
Yeah.
or the fall of the Soviet Union.
Right.
Who could have predicted that?
Nobody.
Right.
But here's the thing. We rely on accurate forecasts every day.
Every day.
Think about it, like weather predictions or those really accurate Amazon recommendations
Yeah.
or even how insurance companies figure out their rates.
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah.
All these things involve forecasting.
Right.
And, the book argues that while some events are inherently unpredictable,
Yeah.
we can really improve our foresight if we have the right tools and techniques.
So there's a difference between, like, predicting the exact moment
Yeah.
that a volcano is going to erupt
Yeah.
and anticipating increased volcanic activity
Right.
in a region.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
And that's where the book's emphasis on testing and measuring comes in.
Right.
Tetlock draws this parallel to the field of medicine. Like,
Okay.
for centuries, treatments were based on, like, tradition
Yeah.
and intuition.
Right.
But there wasn't a lot of proof that they really worked.
Right.
But then rigorous testing came around and
Yeah.
randomized controlled trials,
Mhm.
and boom, medicine starts making real progress.
Right.
So he argues that forecasting needs the same kind of revolution.
With the same emphasis on data and evidence.
Yeah. So it shouldn't just be like some abstract theory.
It shouldn't.
Like, Tetlock has some personal experience
He does.
with
Yes.
this,
Yeah.
with the way forecasting research can be misinterpreted.
Totally.
I mean, his early research on political forecasting
Mm-hmm.
was actually twisted into this popular but misleading idea
Yeah.
that all experts are useless.
Yeah. Remember that phrase?
Experts are no better than chimps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely heard that.
A lot of people have.
But that just seems like a huge oversimplification.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's why the book stresses the need for, like, precise language and probabilities when we talk about forecasting.
Mhm.
So instead of vague terms like
Yeah.
likely or possible,
Right.
forecasts need to be testable,
Mm.
and they should use clear probability estimates.
So instead of saying something's likely,
Right.
you should say it has like a 60% chance
Exactly.
of happening or something like that.
Yeah.
So there. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how do we actually become better forecasters?
Mm-hmm.
The book talks about thinking like a dragonfly,
Right.
which I have to admit sounds a little out there.
Yeah.
It
It
is.
is. But it's a powerful metaphor.
Okay.
So the book explains that we have two systems of thinking.
Okay.
System one
Mm-hmm.
is our intuition.
Okay.
It's fast, automatic,
Yeah.
based on our gut reaction.
Right.
System two,
Mhm.
slower, more deliberate,
Okay.
and analytical.
So we need both.
We need both.
But the key is
Right.
knowing when to use which.
When to use which.
So sometimes our intuition is spot on.
Totally.
Like a firefighter instantly knowing a building's about to collapse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But other times, our intuition can lead us astray,
Right.
especially in fields like stock picking,
Okay.
where the cues we rely on are
Yeah.
unreliable.
So it's like, would you trust your gut feeling to perform surgery?
You would not.
Probably not.
No.
Yeah, because there are trained experts
Right.
with years of experience and knowledge.
Yes.
So forecasting is similar.
It is.
There are skills and techniques
Yes.
that you can learn.
Totally.
This is getting really interesting.
Oh,
The book also talks a lot about perspective taking,
right.
seeing a situation from different angles.
Yeah.
Like a dragonfly with its 1,000 lenses.
1,000 lenses.
Why is that so important for good forecasting?
Well, it's about overcoming
Yeah.
our biases and limitations.
Mhm.
So think about it this way. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle,
Mhm.
but you're only allowed to look at one piece at a time.
Okay.
That's how our biases often work.
Right.
They limit our perspective
Yeah.
and make it hard to see the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
But superforecasters are like puzzle masters.
Okay.
They can see all the pieces and how they fit together.
Right.
And they do that by actively seeking out
Okay.
diverse viewpoints and considering all angles.
So it's like, you see this in poker.
You do.
You know, like
Totally.
forecasting requires stepping outside of your own assumptions
It does.
and considering,
Yeah.
you know, your perspective might be limited
Mm-hmm.
and you need to actively seek out other viewpoints
Yeah.
to improve your accuracy.
Yes. And the book shares this anecdote about
Okay.
Annie Duke, who's a professional poker player.
Mm-hmm.
She consistently beats her opponents.
Wow.
And even experienced players often fail to consider their opponent's perspective,
Oh, wow.
which can lead to costly misjudgments.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
they think they have the best hand,
Right.
but they don't know what the other person has.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so perspective taking is crucial
That it is.
for accurate forecasting.
Yes.
Speaking of different perspectives,
Yeah.
the book also talks about this idea
Mm-hmm.
of the wisdom of the crowd,
Right.
which makes me think of that classic story about guessing an ox's weight.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that one?
Yeah. So Francis Galton,
Mm-hmm.
this statistician, found that the average of hundreds of guesses from a crowd was incredibly close to the ox's actual weight.
Really?
Even though a lot of the individual guesses were way off,
Wow.
the errors tended to cancel each other out.
Wow. So fascinating how individual biases can just
They did.
balance each other out
Right.
when you have enough people.
Yeah. And the book takes this concept a step further
Mm-hmm.
by talking about the IRPA forecasting tournament.
Okay.
So this was a massive multi-year
Wow.
effort funded by the intelligence community.
Wow. So the government really put some resources into this.
They did.
What did they find out?
Well, what's interesting is that ordinary people
Okay.
consistently outperformed intelligence analysts
Really?
with access to classified information.
Wait, so they took a bunch of random people off the street?
Well, they weren't random,
Okay.
but they were just ordinary people.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. And they were more accurate
they were more accurate.
than intelligence analysts.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
I know, it's amazing.
Wow.
So there's this guy, Doug Lorch,
Okay.
retired computer programmer.
A retiree
Yeah,
beat intelligence professionals.
he did.
Wow. How is that even possible?
I know, it's crazy.
What was his secret?
So what's so interesting is that Doug and others like him
Yeah.
were able to achieve this extraordinary forecasting accuracy,
Right.
not because they had special access or insider knowledge,
Yeah.
but because they approached forecasting in
Right.
a very specific way.
Mhm.
The book calls these folks superforecasters.
Okay. So tell me, like, what are the secrets of these super forecasters?
They had strategies,
Okay.
and the book dives into them.
Okay.
One technique they use is called Fermi-style decomposition.
Okay. Fermi-style decomposition, what is that?
So it's a technique where you break down a complex problem
Okay.
into smaller, more manageable questions.
Okay.
So like say you're trying to predict the success of a new product. Instead of relying on your gut feeling,
Okay.
you might estimate the market size or the potential customer base
Mm-hmm.
or the manufacturing costs.
Right.
And by analyzing these smaller pieces, you can build a more accurate forecast.
It's like taking apart a clock to see how it works.
Exactly.
Yeah. Instead of getting overwhelmed by the big picture,
Totally.
you zoom in and focus on the pieces.
Yes.
Okay.
And importantly, super forecasters are constantly updating
Okay.
for forecasts as new information comes in.
Yeah.
So they're not afraid to admit when they're wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and they're always learning,
Yeah.
refining their approach.
So you have to be willing to change your mind
Right.
when the evidence changes.
You do.
But how do you avoid just like getting
Yeah.
swayed by every little piece of news?
That's the key challenge.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance between underreacting to new information
Yeah.
and overreacting to noise.
Like steering a ship. You need to make course corrections, but you don't want to zigzag all over the ocean.
Exactly.
Small incremental adjustments. though.
Precisely. That brings us to another
Okay.
fascinating insight from the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
The power of collaboration.
You mean like two heads are better than one?
More like a diverse group of minds working together
Okay.
can outperform even the smartest individual.
Okay.
So the book contrasts
Mhm.
the Bay of Pigs fiasco
Right.
with the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Okay.
showing that the same team
Mm-hmm.
can make disastrous decisions
Yeah.
or brilliant ones,
Right.
depending on how they interact.
That's a good point. So what makes for a successful
Right.
forecasting team?
Right. So
Is it just having a bunch of smart people in a room?
It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
So the book highlights the dangers of groupthink,
Mm-hmm.
where everyone agrees just to avoid conflict.
Right.
So instead, super forecaster teams
Mm-hmm.
encourage constructive confrontation. They challenge each other's assumptions,
Right,
and
yeah.
they welcome diverse perspectives,
Mhm.
even if it leads to disagreements.
So respectful debate
Right.
and asking tough questions.
Yeah,
And being open to changing your mind,
exactly.
even when it's uncomfortable.
And the book is full of examples of these teams
Yeah.
navigating complex issues,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes feeling intimidated, sometimes disagreeing,
Right.
but ultimately coming up with more
Mhm.
accurate forecasts than any individual could on their own.
Cool. This is so cool.
Yeah,
We've covered a lot already, but
we have.
there's still so much more to explore.
There is.
Like the black swan,
Right, yeah.
these unpredictable events
Yeah.
that can really throw our forecast off.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah. Yeah.
The book has some fascinating
Yeah.
insights into how to approach those,
Oh, yeah.
even if we can't predict the specifics. And
Yeah.
we also need to talk about the practical takeaways,
Mhm.
how you can apply all of this to your own life, no matter what your field is.
Yeah. We've only just scratched the surface
We have.
of super forecasting.
Yeah.
We'll be back soon with part 2
All right.
to explore black swan events and how to use these insights to make better decisions.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.
Until then,
Welcome back to our deep dive into super forecasting.
yes.
Last time we left off talking about black swan events.
We did.
Those rare high-impact events that kind of come out of nowhere
Yeah,
and can really shake things up.
they can.
So if the super forecasters are so good,
Right.
how do they deal with the unexpected?
Right. Well, the book brings up
Yeah.
Nassim Taleb,
Yeah.
who you might know from his book, The Black Swan.
Yeah.
He really popularized that term
Yeah.
and argued that these events are, by their very nature, impossible to predict.
Right. Like if you could see them coming,
Yeah,
they wouldn't be black swans.
exactly.
Right.
But Tetlock doesn't completely dismiss
Okay.
Taleb's ideas.
Oh.
He digs into the different ways we can define a black swan.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, you have these truly unimaginable events.
Like aliens landing on the White House lawn tomorrow.
Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah.
But you get the idea.
Okay.
Then there's a more modest definition of a black swan.
Mm-hmm.
Events that are highly improbable,
Right.
but still have massive consequences
Yeah.
if they happen.
Like 9/11.
Like 9/11, exactly.
Yeah.
So before 9/11,
Hmm.
using a plane as a weapon wasn't totally unimaginable.
Right.
There had been some hints.
Right. It wasn't like a completely new idea.
Right.
But the specific event on that scale
Yeah.
was shocking
It was shocking.
and incredibly consequential.
It was.
And this is where super forecasting comes in.
Yes.
So while we can't predict
Right.
specific black swan events,
Yeah.
we can become better at anticipating
Yes.
broad trends
Right.
and potential disruptions.
It's kind of like earthquake preparedness. You can't predict the exact date and time
Right.
of the next big one,
But you can.
but you can make sure your buildings are up to code
Mhm.
and you have an emergency kit ready.
Right. So instead of trying to pinpoint the exact
Yeah.
when and how,
Yeah.
you just try to prepare for
Exactly.
a wider range of possibilities.
It's about managing risk
Right.
and building resilience.
Not just relying on
Right.
precise predictions.
Exactly.
The book also points out that we try to find meaning
We do.
in random events,
Yes.
like seeing faces in the clouds
exactly.
or
that.
thinking we won the lottery because it was meant to be.
Right. And while those beliefs can be comforting,
Right.
they can also prevent us from thinking clearly
Mm-hmm.
and probabilistically.
So instead of asking why, something happened,
Right.
which leads to all sorts of,
Speculation.
yeah, like speculation and storytelling.
Yeah.
We should focus on how it happened.
Exactly.
What was the chain of events?
Yes.
So it's about shifting from a mystical view of the world
Right.
to a more scientific one.
Exactly.
Okay.
Looking for evidence and patterns.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to unexpected events.
And this brings us to another important concept,
Yes.
constantly updating our beliefs
Right.
as new information comes in.
Right. Remember John Maynard Keynes,
Yeah.
the economist?
Mm.
He famously said, "When the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir?"
That's a great quote.
Yeah,
And it really speaks to the importance of intellectual humility.
it does.
You know, being open to
Yeah.
new information
Yeah.
and being willing to change your mind.
Yeah, and he was a great example of this.
Yeah.
Incredibly successful investor, partly because he was always willing to admit when he was wrong
Yeah.
and adjust his approach based on new evidence.
If you're clinging to a losing stock,
Right.
you're probably going to lose even more money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the same in forecasting. If you stubbornly stick to your predictions,
Yeah.
even when the evidence is pointing in a different direction,
Mhm.
you're not going to be very successful.
So this brings us to the idea of a growth mindset,
Yes,
which is so crucial
it is.
for super forecasting.
A growth mindset is all about being
Mhm.
open to learning
Mm.
and change
Okay.
and constantly trying to improve your skills and knowledge.
And the book highlights
And does.
Ann Kilkenny,
Ann Kilkenny. Yeah.
who participated in the IRPA tournament.
Yeah, an Alaskan housewife.
Yeah, she had no background in geopolitics.
No, but she approached it with incredible curiosity
Right.
and a passion for learning.
That's really cool.
Yeah, she wasn't afraid to make mistakes,
Mm.
and she constantly sought out feedback.
So it's inspiring to see that anyone can improve
Right.
their forecasting skills with the right mindset. It's
Yeah.
about embracing
Yes.
the process of learning and getting better.
That reminds me, we've been talking a lot about how super forecasters make predictions,
Yeah.
but how do we know
Yeah.
if those predictions are actually good?
That's a great question.
It is, and it leads us to a critical point,
Okay.
the importance of keeping score.
So it's not enough to just make predictions.
No,
I have to
that-
actually
we have to track how accurate they are.
track your accuracy.
Absolutely. Yeah, without feedback, we can't learn and improve.
Be like playing darts in the dark.
Exactly.
You'd never know if you were hitting the target.
Right,
Right? But I imagine keeping score
right.
is not always so simple.
There's a catch
Mhm.
to keep score effectively.
Yeah.
We need to use clear definitions
Mm-hmm.
and precise language.
Okay.
We need to avoid vague terms
Right.
that make it impossible to judge a forecast's accuracy.
So, like,
Yeah.
there's a chance it might rain tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah, like that doesn't really help
We're not very helpful.
for keeping score.
No.
Remember those economists
Yes.
who wrote a letter
Yes.
to the Fed chairman warning about inflation?
That's the one.
Yeah.
The language they used was so vague
Yeah.
that even years later,
Mm-hmm.
it's impossible to say if
Right.
their predictions were right or wrong.
So it's like playing a game
Yeah.
without any clear rules
Right.
or a way to determine the winner.
Exactly.
And the book argues that
It does.
this lack of rigor in forecasting
Yes,
is a big problem,
it is.
especially in fields like politics and economics.
We need to hold ourselves accountable
Yeah.
for the predictions we make.
So how do we fix that?
Right. So Tetlock proposes
Yeah.
this really interesting idea
Okay.
called adversarial collaboration.
Adversarial collaboration.
Yeah,
That sounds a little bit like an oxymoron.
it does.
Like, how can you be adversarial
Right.
and collaborate?
So imagine you take two experts
Okay.
with opposing views, and you
Okay.
have them work together with the help of some neutral facilitator
Oh.
to create a very specific,
Mm-hmm.
testable forecast
Okay.
that would actually settle their disagreement.
So instead of just arguing back and forth, they would
Yeah.
have to come up with
Yeah.
concrete predictions that could be measured.
Exactly.
So it's like a structured debate
It is.
with clear metrics to determine who's
Yeah.
right.
It's about moving beyond
Yeah.
the usual shouting matches
Right.
to actually learn from experience and make
Yeah.
some real progress.
But would that actually work?
I know.
Like, aren't some debates just too politically charged?
It would be challenging.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
But the potential payoff is huge.
It is. It
Yeah.
could transform
Right.
how we think about complex issues.
It could make us more accountable
It could.
for our predictions.
Right.
And more open to changing our minds.
Exactly. And it brings us back to
Yeah.
one of the core themes of the book,
Hmm.
the importance of humility
Right.
and openness. So the best forecasters
Yeah.
aren't afraid to admit
Right.
that they don't know everything
Of constantly questioning their assumptions.
and seeking out
Yeah.
diverse perspectives
Right.
and updating their beliefs as new information comes in.
Speaking of practical applications,
Yes,
the book ends with a chapter
it does.
on actionable takeaways,
Yes.
offering 10 commandments
10 Commandments.
for aspiring super forecasters.
The 10 Commandments of Super Forecasting.
Okay, let's dive into those.
I'm excited.
All right, you mentioned the 10 commandments of super forecasting.
I did.
That sounds pretty epic.
Yeah.
Where do we start?
So commandment number 1's all about triage.
Triage. Like in a like in a hospital.
Hospital emergency room.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about prioritizing your efforts.
Okay.
Some questions are inherently impossible to forecast accurately.
Yeah.
Like trying to predict who will win a presidential election
Right.
12 years from now.
Way too many variables. Yeah, way too many.
Yeah.
Others are more manageable and likely to yield useful insights.
So it's about choosing your battles wisely.
Exactly.
Don't waste your time
Right.
on questions that are basically unanswerable.
Yeah, focus on the question
Yeah.
where good forecasting can make a difference.
Okay, so commandment number 1 is triage.
It's commandment number 2.
Okay.
Break seemingly intractable problems
Okay.
into smaller, more manageable sub-problems.
I'm sensing a theme here.
You are.
Breaking things down.
Yeah.
Simplifying.
Simplifying.
Okay.
The book uses the example of Enrico Fermi,
Okay.
a physicist who loved to estimate answers to
Yeah.
seemingly impossible questions.
Like how many piano tuners there are in Chicago.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Sounds impossible, right?
Yeah.
But Fermi would break it down into smaller questions.
Okay.
Like how many pianos are in the city?
Right.
How often do they need tuning?
Mm-mm.
How many pianos could a tuner service in a day? And by making educated guesses
Yeah.
about these sub-problems,
Right.
he could come up with a surprisingly accurate estimate for the overall question.
Because like reverse engineering. A complex problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Instead of getting overwhelmed by the big picture,
Right.
you zoom in
Focus on the pieces.
on the individual
You think
pieces.
you can actually understand.
Yes, and this approach is something superforecasters do really well.
Okay.
Speaking of different perspectives,
Okay.
that brings us to commandment number 3.
Okay.
Strike the right balance between inside and outside views.
Remind me what those are again.
So the inside view is all about the specifics of the
Okay.
situation you're looking at.
Hmm.
The outside view is about taking a step back
Okay.
and considering the bigger picture,
Okay.
looking at historical pattern
Right.
and base rates.
But for that piano tuner question,
Yes,
the inside view would be like specific neighborhoods in Chicago.
right.
And the outside view would be like, the average number of piano tuners per capita in
Exactly.
a comparable city.
That's a great example.
Okay.
Superforecasters are really good at integrating
Okay.
both perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get bogged down in the details
Okay.
of the inside view,
Right.
but they also don't rely solely on abstract statistics.
Right. They find that sweet spot.
They find that sweet spot.
In between.
Yes,
I'm starting to see how all these commandments kind of build on each other.
they do.
It's not just about one technique.
Right.
It's about a whole
new way of thinking.
a whole new way of thinking.
Yeah.
Commandment number 4,
Okay.
embrace the shadow of doubt.
Embrace the shadow of doubt.
So even with all the data and analysis,
Yes.
there's always a chance.
There's always a chance.
You could be wrong.
You could be wrong.
Right. It goes back to that black swan idea.
It does.
You can't eliminate uncertainty completely.
You can't.
Yeah, and superforecasters get this.
They do.
They understand this.
They don't pretend to have all the answers.
Right.
They're comfortable with probability,
Mm-hmm.
with shades of maybe.
Okay.
This allows them to stay flexible
Right.
and adjust their predictions
Mhm.
as new information comes in.
So instead of clinging to certainty,
Right.
they acknowledge
They do.
that the best predictions still have
Yeah.
a margin of error.
They see uncertainty
Yeah.
as a natural part of the process,
Okay.
not something to be feared.
Okay. Ready for commandment number 5?
I am.
Look for the clashing causal forces at play.
Look for the clashing causal forces.
Okay. That sounds
I know it's a bit more complex.
a little bit more complex.
It's about understanding that most events
Okay.
are the result of multiple factors,
Okay.
often pushing in different directions.
Okay.
It's rarely a simple cause and effect situation.
So for a geopolitical forecast,
Yeah.
you might have economic forces pushing one way, political forces another.
And cultural and social factors, too.
Yeah, all playing a role
Yeah.
at the same time.
Superforecasters excel
Okay.
at identifying these competing forces.
Okay.
And figuring out which ones are likely to have the strongest impact.
So it's about seeing the world
It is.
in shades of gray,
Shades of gray.
not just black and white.
Exactly.
Okay, commandment number 6,
All right.
strive to distinguish as many degrees of doubt
Okay.
as the problem permits, but no more.
As the problem permits, but no more.
Okay, break that down for me.
So remember that 3-setting mental dial.
Yeah.
Gonna happen, not gonna happen, and maybe?
Yeah.
super forecasters reject that
Okay.
oversimplification. They think in more nuanced shades of probability.
Mhm.
So they're comfortable using that full spectrum
Okay.
from 1% to 99%.
Okay.
And they don't shy away
Mhm.
from making precise judgments,
Right.
even when it feels unnatural.
So it's like having a dimmer switch
It is.
instead of just an on-off switch.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can fine-tune your level of confidence based on the evidence.
Okay, commandment number 7.
Right.
Balance information from different sources.
Balance information.
So it's not just about looking at the situation
Right.
from different angles.
Yeah.
It's also about getting your information
It is.
from a variety of sources.
Exactly. So it's about actively seeking out
Okay.
diverse perspectives and not just relying on your usual news outlets.
So reading different newspapers,
Yes.
listening to podcasts
Yes.
with different viewpoints.
Talking to people you normally disagree with.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The more diverse your information sources,
Yeah.
the less likely you are
Right.
to fall prey to confirmation bias.
Which is just looking for information.
Right.
That confirms what you already believe.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
Commandment number 8.
all right.
Strike the right balance between
Sure.
underreacting and overreacting to new information.
Strike the right balance.
That's the ship steering analogy.
It is.
Make course corrections. Yes.
But don't swerve all over the place.
Right. You need to find that sweet spot
Yeah.
between being too slow to update your beliefs
Yeah.
and being too swayed
Right.
by every little piece of news.
So, small incremental adjustments
Precisely.
are key.
Remember Tim Minto
Yes.
and those tiny course
Yeah.
corrections?
He avoided both extremes.
He did.
Okay.
Commandment number 9.
Okay.
Look for the errors behind your mistakes,
Okay.
but beware of rear view mirror hindsight bias.
Okay, that's a mouthful.
I know.
Read it down.
So it's about honestly analyzing
Okay.
why you were wrong,
Mm-hmm.
what you can learn from it.
Yeah.
How can you avoid
Right.
making the same mistake in the future?
So it's not about beating yourself up
It's not.
for being wrong.
It's about learning. It's about turning those mistakes into learning experiences,
Exactly.
right? And finally, commandment number 10,
Okay.
master the air balancing bicycle.
Master the air balancing bicycle.
I feel like that's kind of a metaphor. It's
For the whole process.
super forecasting process.
Yeah. It's about recognizing that
Yeah.
becoming a super forecaster
Yeah.
isn't about memorizing a set of rules. It's
Mhm.
about practice,
Right.
feedback, and constantly striving
Yeah.
to improve,
Like riding a bike.
like riding a bike. or
Exactly. You're going to fall down a few times,
You are.
but eventually you'll
Find your balance.
find your
and
balance.
start rolling smoothly.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly.
And the book makes a really compelling case
It does.
that anyone can get better
Anyone.
at forecasting with the right mindset and effort.
It's a skill
Yeah.
that can be learned and honed.
This has been an incredible deep
It
dive
has.
into super forecasting.
Oh, I know.
We've covered so much ground,
We have.
from the limits and possibilities of prediction
Yes.
to the importance of testing and measuring,
Right?
the power of perspective taking,
Yes.
and these 10 commandments for aspiring super forecasters.
The 10 Commandments.
We've explored how super forecasters think,
We have.
how they approach uncertainty,
Yes.
and how they've managed to outperform
Right.
even the most seasoned intelligence analysts.
They are impressive.
But most importantly, we've seen
Yes.
how all these principles can be applied to our own lives.
No matter what we're doing.
Whether we're making personal decisions,
Yeah.
navigating our professional landscape,
Right.
or just trying to make sense of this constant barrage of
Yes.
information
Yeah.
coming at us from all directions.
So as you go about your day,
Yeah.
I encourage you to ask yourself,
Okay.
what assumptions am I making?
Mm-hmm.
What information am I missing?
Right.
And how can I apply these super forecasting principles
Yeah.
to make more informed judgments about the future?
That's a great question to ask.
It is.
Because as Philip Tetlock reminds us,
Yes,
the future is uncertain,
it is.
but it's not entirely unknowable.
That's right.
And by embracing probabilistic thinking,
Yes.
cultivating a growth mindset, and
Yeah.
learning from our experiences,
Mm-hmm.
we can all become better forecasters.
We can.
And that's a superpower worth striving for.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive
Yes, thank you.
into super forecasting.
It's been fun.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.